Hey, real quick video today on canning tomatoes. It's super easy and it's great to have a stockpile of tomatoes in your pantry for chilies or soups or stews or whatever you might want. We had some other tomatoes that were left over from our garden, and I've already kind of started the process here, so I'm just going to show you what I've done. I've started by dicing up all the tomatoes that I have. You can see that these are about this big. You could make them smaller if you want. I like them bigger, but you can certainly dice them smaller. And then I've gone ahead and packed them into my jars. And again, with these jars, you want to leave about 1 inch of head space. So I have a couple more jars worth to pack up. You can see that I'm pressing the tomatoes down into the jars to make sure they're tightly packed. You don't want to have any gaps or air bubbles in here. I'm just going to keep packing all these jars and leaving about 1 inch of head space at the top. So I've gotten about 5 pints jars of these tomatoes packed in tightly. And I'm just going to go around and clean the outside of the rim of the glass off. You don't want any tomato remnants on that, so that you want to make sure that you have a nice, good, tight seal as you can your jars. Okay, before we put the lids on, we want to add salt and lemon juice to each of the jars. You're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt per pint jar. I'm going to add lemon juice. I just used store-bought lemon juice, but you can certainly use fresh lemon juice. It's just this is what I had on hand. So you're going to add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice to each of the jars. Okay, now we're going to put the lids on. These lids and rims have been in boiling hot water. That not only sanitizes them, but that helps them to seal better as you put them on the jars. They are very hot, so you have to be very careful as you place them on the jar. So you place the rim on, you place the lid on, and then you place the rim on. Whoops, and I just want to do it with one hand. But you want to get this hand tightened so it's nice and snug by hand. So that one's ready to go, and we'll do the rest. So now these are all hand tightened. The rims are hand tightened. I'm going to use my grabber here, and I'm going to transfer all my jars into my big canning pot. There's already water in this canning pot, and the water should be over the tops of the jars when you're doing water bath canning. And since these tomatoes are cold packed, that means that the tomatoes were cold when I placed them in the jars. We are starting with cold water in the canner. And I'm going to bring the water up to boil as the jars are in the canner. When you place the jars into the canner, on the bottom of the canner you'll see there is a ring with little holes in it. That's kind of like it's a barrier between the jars and the bottom of the pot. You don't want the jars touching the bottom of the pot because they can break. You'll also notice that as I place my jars into the pot, they're not touching each other. You don't want the jars to touch each other or the sides of the pot or the bottom of the pot. Okay, so I have my jars. They're in my pot here. The water is over the jars by about 1 inch, and the jars are not touching the sides. They're not touching each other. And I'm going to be processing these pint jars for 60 minutes. Now, if you're at sea level, you can process them for 45 minutes, but I'm at a higher altitude, so I need to do it for 15 additional minutes. And because these are cold, I put the tomatoes in when they were cold, so the jars are cold. So I'm bringing the water up to temperature while the jars are in there. And then when the water gets to temperature and starts to boil, that's when I start my timer for 60 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on and just pay attention and listen to the pot. And then when it starts to boil, I will start my timer. All right, so we are at a rolling boil. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat down a little bit to keep it at more of a constant boil. And I'm going to keep watching it to make sure that it's still boiling at a constant boil, but not too intense. And I'm going to set my timer for 60 minutes. All right, so these are done. They were in boiling water processing for 60 minutes. Again, if you are at sea level, You really just need to process them for 45 minutes. So I'm going to carefully remove them from the hot boiling water. If you don't have one of these jar grabbers, it's essential when canning. And I like to set them on a clean towel and let them cool off. Here is my 5 jars of canned tomatoes. They're just fresh from the processing and they're cooling off. And after they're cool, I will remove the rims and they'll be ready to be put in storage. And there you have it. Canning tomatoes is super easy, and it's awesome to have those tomatoes on your shelf during the wintertime. When you're storing your tomatoes or anything that you've canned, you always want to remove the rims. Of course, leave the lids on, but remove the rims. If you have any questions or comments, please be sure to leave those down below, and I hope you've enjoyed this video today. Thanks for watching.